Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, I'm going to start over from the beginning. Here we go. I stand resolved that students should rate their teachers, and teachers who are significantly and consistently below average should be fired. This resolution is discussing teachers who significantly, so by a substantial margin, underperform their coworkers in the eyes of students. Teachers who fail over a long period of time. It's these teachers who don't inspire children, that I believe we should dismiss. The value I want to promote in this round is the best interest of the child. I'll be talking about U.S. public school K through 12 teachers. The test I'll be advocating for is the tripod test, as researched by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which asks about 7 basic categories related to the student's classroom experience. I'll read a couple examples. Care. My teacher really tries to understand how students feel about things. Control. Our class stays busy and doesn't waste time. Clarify. My teacher explains difficult things clearly. All the questions are similar, and they have multiple questions for each category. Quote, a study of nearly 2,000 K through 12 students found that student ratings were significantly more accurate in predicting student achievement than teachers' self-ratings, principals' ratings, and principal summative ratings. This was true in topics as diverse as language and mathematics. That was published in the validation by Vanderbilt University in a study titled The Validation of a Student Survey on Teacher Practice. In the study Student Surveys for School Teacher Evaluation in the Journal of Personal Evaluation, it was found that, quote, Peterson, Walquist, and Bone in a 2000 survey similarly found student surveys are valid and reliable for teacher evaluation at elementary, middle school, and high school levels. Another quote says, in a research synthesis of teacher evaluation methods, the author ultimately concluded that previous studies, quote, provide convincing evidence that student ratings of teachings are worth inclusion in teacher evaluation systems. That was a study called Approaches to Evaluating Teacher Effectiveness, a research synthesis that was published in the National Comprehensive Center for Teacher Quality's periodical that they put out. And I have more evidence that I can get to in later speeches, but I think it's absolutely important that we value the best interest of the child, the individual who has to spend so many hours directly under this one adult, and that nothing else can provide as much feedback as these tests in determining whether or not you should keep bad teachers on.
Well, I agree with your criteria, but I do think PROS Plan has 2 flaws. Let me illustrate those. First of all, it relies only on student evaluations. Students may have good insights, that's true. They're in the classroom constantly, but they also have weaknesses. There are motivated by grades, students who consistently get better ratings, give better ratings to less challenging teachers. They're not trained in education, giving them a limited grasp of teaching. They're not consistent or disciplined. Each has their own agenda or preferences. They may not take the task very seriously. They may rate high out of kindness or low out of spite, and so forth. Basing employment of the education system entirely on the whims of students would be irresponsible. Secondly, this most importantly, it ignores teacher shortages. The U.S. has a serious teacher shortage. This is from Washington Post 2017. The 2017-18 school year has started in many places across the country, and federal data shows that every state is dealing with shortages of teachers in key subject areas. Some are having trouble finding substitute teachers too. The annual nationwide listing addresses areas of teacher shortages compiled by the U.S. Education Department shows many districts struggling to fill positions in subjects such as math, the traditional sciences, foreign language, special education, also in reading, English, language arts, history, art, music, elementary education, middle school education, career and technical development, health, and computer science, and that is not an exhaustive list. Teacher shortages are nothing new, but the problem has grown more acute in recent years as the profession has become hit with lower morale overall. Why? Lower pay, unfair educational evaluation methods, assaults on due process rights, high-stakes testing requirements, insufficient resources, and other issues. The PRO plan operates by getting rid of existing teachers who perform poorly on evaluations and presumably hiring replacements of an unknown quality. But What if there are no in place replacements? It would either result in no teachers in the classroom, or we would fail to fire anyone, thus negating the primary mechanism of Pro's plan. This type of plan is one of the reasons that fewer teachers are entering the profession and more are leaving. This problem exacerbates the current teacher shortage, creates more teacher shortages, and thus is bad for education overall and negates your ability to enact your plan. So it's quite fatal. I offer a better plan. 1, students can evaluate their teachers. That's great. 2, administrators who use student evaluations along with professional evaluations to identify skills that the teachers need to develop to be more effective. 3, administrators arrange for training and mentoring programs for teachers to address their weaknesses. 4, teachers are only fired if they cannot make improvements over time, and only if there are quality replacements available. Otherwise, there's no point. Instead of focusing on firing, we should focus on training. Instead of one metric of success, we should have a rational, balanced approach. And instead of removing only the worst teachers, we improve all the teachers in the system.
Okay, I just wanted to start out by stating that I don't necessarily disagree with the Khan's counterplan, because it's not a valid counterplan. It's not non-topical like it should be if it was a counterplan. The resolution simply says students should rate their teachers, and teachers who are significantly and consistently below average should be fired. It doesn't talk about other reasons we might fire teachers and other things we might consider, but that teachers who are over time, like he said, far below average, they should be fired. The plan he stated was absolutely topical in every way. He said, you can give them a long time to improve. I don't disagree with that. But if they don't improve if they are consistently bad, like the resolution states, they should be fired. Now, I'll address his 2 other points, starting with unfairness and then mentioning teacher shortages. Both these are pretty interesting points I wanted to touch on. A student perception survey for a pilot program in Georgia found that high survey ratings correlated with high academic achievement and engagement and self-efficacy. That was from the validation of a student survey on teacher practice published by Vanderbilt University. Quote, studies consistently suggest that student surveys are reliable measures of teacher effectiveness. Survey designers have established content validity by developing research-based relevant questions. That was by the Hanover Research for the Missouri Department of Elementary Education. At the end of the year, some Memphis teachers were dismissed for low evaluation scores. This is from a story by The Atlantic, but less than 2% of the faculty. Again, it's fair when it's an average of absolutely everyone. And they found that the students in general are not just going after, but especially these grade school students, the students I'm talking about, they are very interested in providing this type of feedback. Even young children can evaluate their teachers with relative accuracy to Kane's surprise. In fact, the only thing that the researchers found to better predict a teacher's test score gains was past test score gains. That's from an article in The Atlantic on this very subject. Now, in regards to teacher, the number of new teachers, I'll have to get to that in a moment because I can't find my quote, but a national nonprofit organization called the New Teacher Initiative, they're very excited about this exact type of test because it makes new teachers excited knowing that they can be confident in their results, they'll be rewarded with it, and that old teachers won't clog the system by taking up space.
The counterplan that I offer is the sense that it does not accept the idea that we should automatically fire teachers based entirely on the scores from the students that rate. Fine if the scores are involved in some fashion, but there should be no automatic trigger that when you consistently fall below average, say, what is it, 3 years, for whatever it happens to be, there's no automatic trigger that just fires you on the spot because you couldn't get those scores up. It's a decision made by the administrators of the school based on the needs of the staffing of the school, the experience of the students and the teachers, and their evaluation of the students. The students are going to have a lot of good information. That's great. But to use it as an automatic mechanism to make the decision, it's a decision-making factor. That is how our plan is significantly different from Pro's plan. And falls outside of the scope of the topic. Now, so we talked about the automatic thing, and there's a unique disadvantage to Pro's plan, which has to do with the teacher shortages. teachers out of the profession because they see this as an arbitrary, harsh rule that doesn't take into account the full range of their skills, the experiences of the school, and a number of other factors. Also, I'll point out another disadvantage of the plan is that the student ratings, if a teacher moves from one school to another, you wouldn't necessarily have these things because they don't share this information across school districts. So you wouldn't be able to enact on this kind of teacher purge necessarily under those conditions, and teachers do move from school to school. So that's another unique disadvantage of that plan, is where our plan, it puts the decisions in the hands of the administrators so they can make an educated decision based on all the factors that are available and decide. Plus, we have the teacher training, which is an excellent mechanism in order to improve all the teachers, not just get rid of the worst, but make all the teachers better. As where the pro plan just axes people and hopes for the best. That's not really a great way to drive an education system, just cutting people out. It's much better to improve the people that you have, and only under very extreme circumstances, get rid of people who can't improve themselves. Let's talk a little bit about the weakness of student evaluations. There's a lot of plus sides. I don't necessarily disagree with some of the evidence, but these are the reasons that teachers are worried about student evaluations, because they're kind of arbitrary. Studies show this from Felix Stark, professor of statistics at UK Berkeley. Students' teaching evaluation scores are highly correlated to the students' grade expectations. Effective scores and enjoyment scores are almost always related, so if they're having fun, they think the teachers are more effective. Student ratings of instructors can be predicted. Students' reactions to a 30-second silent video of the instructor. First impressions made the end of course evaluation scores, and physical attractiveness of these scores. So the gender of instructors and students mattered, as does the age of the instructors. All these things have an impact. And when you're a teacher and you know about these statistics, because all teachers kind of are involved with the culture, say, look, alone with the students input, but this worries me, and teachers are leaving the profession because they feel they're being treated unfairly, and that is going to have an incredibly detrimental system because both good and bad teachers are leaving because of these issues.
I'm going to spend a lot of this speech talking about new teachers and what teachers think about these test scores. The Khan got into some disadvantages he alleges against my case later on. However, he didn't really bring those up too much earlier, and he hasn't really addressed the myriad of sources from Harvard, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all over the place that I've referenced that people have found there's a high correlation. Like one of my pieces of evidence said earlier, there is no higher correlation between a way to test for something and actual academic test results than these student evaluations. But with that said, I'm just going to jump right in and read the quote I was looking for at the end of the last speech. Quote, "The New Teacher Project, a national nonprofit based in Brooklyn that recruits and trains new teachers, last school year used student surveys to evaluate 460 of its 1,006 teachers. They said, quote, the advent of student feedback in teacher evaluations is among the most significant developments for education reform in the last decade." That was Timothy Dowley, the organization's president and a former teacher. This was published in the Atlantic magazine. It goes on to talk about how they are excited because new teachers want to be able to stand out. They want an objective criterion for judging themselves. They want to be able to stand out in the eyes of the students. And new teachers are very excited about students. They are good at investing in students, and they want a return on that investment and not to be held up in the pipeline. There will be advantages to adopting this plan. However, to use another educator, I wanted to talk about a hero of mine, a man by the name of John Holt, who was an educator and an education reform advocate. He taught fifth grade for a long, long time, and then ended up lecturing all the way up to where he was a lecturer at Harvard. He was an advocate of understanding how advanced children really are and catering to their needs. And if we just unlock their needs and inspire them, then they can actually achieve much more than we're willing to give them credit for. He was a New York Times bestselling author. He wrote the book, How Children Learn. And he is an advocate of firing any teacher who does not inspire children, because he thinks that's the sole job of the teacher, is to inspire children. I read other evidence in my last speech about how evaluations correlate with test results. That'll have to do for now. I can get back to why student evals are absolutely accurate in my next speech, but I'm out of time.
Well, there's a guy who thinks that it's important to inspire kids, and I think it's important to inspire kids too. But we really need to know that to actually improve the quality of education. And the only mechanism that the plan offers is we're going to fire teachers. And we don't know that firing teachers, the presumption is, okay, so we fire a bad teacher, right? And then you got to hire a new teacher. But where are you going to get these teachers? With the teacher shortage, you're not going to find any, or you're going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel, and you're going to get more bad teachers to fill in for the bad teachers that you got rid of, except they have less experience now, or maybe you'll get a good one. But again, because we're making these arbitrary judgments and this sort of automatic axe that comes down on your head as a teacher, it's driving people out of the teaching profession and leading to further exacerbating the teacher shortage. So it makes the status quo problem worse than it already is. That's where the PRO plan has an activity that is more fair and balanced and involves the administrators of the school, the principals, and other teachers who are acting as mentors and trainers in order to create a more holistic approach we're going to think is fair and is going to bring people into the profession, and then we'll have more teachers, more choice for schools, better education. Let me tell you a little bit about how good mentoring can be. This is from Education Week 2010. When mentors are well educated, well trained, given time to work intensively with new teachers, they not only help the average teachers become good, they help the good teachers become great teachers. And because new teachers are often assigned to the poorest schools, most challenging classrooms, instructional mentoring programs provide a powerful lever for closing the teacher quality gap and ensuring that all students, regardless of their background, have a real opportunity to succeed. When mentoring programs thrive, school systems are also more likely to develop a comprehensive vision for assessing and supporting instructional excellence and to reconfigure their education, tenure structures that surround that vision. More importantly, they have a much greater chance of transforming their schools into vibrant learning communities capable of helping all teachers and all students succeed. This is very important. We need a program that is going to improve education. And we just don't have any knowledge that just firing people is actually going to achieve that end. However, the affirmative plan has evidence that says it will. Your evidence is that the student evaluations can be pretty well good. The students are sitting in the class all the time observing the teacher. And helpful things to add. And 7C categories, it's like a pretty good kind of evaluation. But even your own evidence mentioned that things are included in the, however, the resolution, which where only measure of measuring a teacher's success. And that's not good. Teachers don't like it. It has arbitrary problems that we need to bring in other viewpoints in order to assess. And it's going to exacerbate the teacher shortage. However, Khan's plan avoids these problems.
Again, I want to stress that this is a values, or I'm treating it as a values case. And I think that teachers who consistently and significantly fall below average in student test results, they deserve to be fired, because we should be valuing the best interests of the child, and we shouldn't lock any child in a classroom for hours a day with someone who consistently and significantly is not regarded as good by those very children. I think that's a pretty baseline standard. However, since it's being treated like a policy round, I do have some advantages that I can talk about with evidence. Quote, there are a number of advantages factoring student perception surveys into teachers' formal evaluations. These were identified, several of these, in the research synthesis of Gore et al. Of teacher evaluations, including that surveys are cost efficient, they can be collected anonymously, require minimal training, are time efficient, and have the ability to track changes over time. That was published in Approaches to Evaluate Teacher Effectiveness, a research synthesis. Even young children can evaluate their teachers with relative accuracy to gain surprise. In fact, the only thing that researchers found to better predict a teacher's test score gains was past test score gains. And again, we do need to fire teachers who can't improve test scores. That was in the Atlantic. Finally, another advantage, quote, the most refreshing aspect of Ferguson survey might be the results don't change dramatically depending on students' race or income. And that is not the case with normal academic test data nationwide. Scores reliably rise depending on how white and affluent a school is. Not true of this. That was also published in the Atlantic's long piece about this exact issue. I have 1 minute left, so let me see what else I can say. I'm actually going to just pass the mic.
Well, in the wild and woolly world of It's not always clear whether something's a plan case or a value case. You kind of have to stake your claim on it. You gave us a specific test that you want to administer, the tripod test, and the resolution calls for a plan of action, which is that students should do some rating and fired. So I just take the plan, the case face value that it calls for this kind of an action, and I think that kind of an action is not a good idea. The primary reason, which my opponent really hasn't been able to address yet, is that there are not enough teachers to go around to just start firing people willy-nilly and hope that we will get good teachers to replace them. We don't have that opportunity because there is a serious teacher shortage. One of the reasons we have a serious teacher shortage is everyone's running around trying to figure out ways to judge teachers so that they can fire them, and that has teachers running scared. We don't want to run around firing teachers. That should be the object of very last resort in order to improve education. And if we do manage to keep that to be a very rare instance, then this plan doesn't really have any significant mechanism for making the education system better. So if you don't fire teachers, it has no mechanism to make them better. If you do fire teachers, you badly exacerbate the teacher shortage, both by chasing them away and getting rid of the qualified teachers that are already in the system. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. It's just not a good approach. A much better approach is to look at the education system and say, we want to improve the quality of teachers. We want to improve the quality of the best teachers. We want to improve the quality of the decent teachers. We also really want to improve the quality of the weakest teachers. They're going to be new. And the way to do that is to get experienced, qualified, educated teachers to come in and help those teachers get better, not to threaten them with an axe, but to use the student evaluations as information as to the areas that they need to work on and improve. And it's just a lot better system for everybody. Let me talk a little bit. There was another study on teacher evaluations, and it speaks a little bit to retention. And this is from the Columbia Business School, Statistical Analysis of Teacher Mentoring. In the analysis above, I find strong relation between the various measures of mentoring quality and teacher evaluation of the impact that mentors have had on success in the classroom. My most consistent finding is that teachers whose mentors had prior experience working in the schools that are more likely to return to teaching in their schools, and that other types of support for new teachers help increase retention, consistent with Smith and Ingersoll's study. I also find that student achievement in both math and reading was higher with teachers who received more hours of mentoring. So we have a significant program here on the con side that could actually improve the education for all children. As we're on the other side, we have a catch-22 situation. It's going to be a problem for students. Either they're not going to have teachers or you're rid of teachers, and therefore there will be no change in the system. Also, I want to extend the idea that the automatic evaluation system will work across different school districts, which is going to be yet another barrier of the plan called for by the resolution.
My opponent believes that because of a teacher shortage that he hasn't even really demonstrated, completely demonstrated, we should leave good kids in classrooms with bad teachers. And that's something I absolutely disagree with. And I absolutely affirm the resolution that if a teacher significantly underperforms the average of other teachers, and that same teacher does it consistently, then they absolutely deserve to be fired. The disadvantage, I guess, could be that there are more kids in some classrooms with better teachers, but why would we want bad teachers around our kids? I'm going to read two important pieces of evidence. The first is addressing something you brought up earlier about what kids do with surveys. Quote, there are some students, knuckleheads, who will just mess the survey up and not take it seriously, Ferguson says, but they are very rare. Students who don't read the questions might give the same response to every item. But when Ferguson recently examined 199,000 surveys, he found that less than 0.5% of students did so in the first 10 questions. Kids, he believes, find questions interesting, so they tend to pay attention. That was published in The Atlantic. And then here's another quote from The Atlantic talking about a Harvard educator who is working on this very question. Kane and his colleagues gave an abbreviated version of the survey to tens of thousands of students in the research study and compared the results with test scores and other measures of effectiveness. The responses did indeed help predict which classes would have the most test score improvement at the end of the year. In math, for example, the teachers rated most highly by students delivered the equivalent of about 6 months of learning than teachers with the lowest ratings. By comparison, teachers who get a master's degree, one of the few ways to earn a pay raise in most schools, delivered about 1 month more learning per year than teachers without one. So this study is saying that a teacher who is good, according to this test, the tripod test that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation studied that Harvard helped create, teachers who are evaluated as good, it's worth a whole extra six months of learning that students would otherwise not have. Why not use this system? There's no disadvantage because 6 months extra improvement is definitely worth slightly larger class sizes when you get rid of, again, like a quote I read earlier, only 2% of teachers in one school were fired when they significantly and consistently were low on these test results.
Right. Leaving good kids with bad teachers. Don't want to do it. Neither of us does. Pro doesn't, con doesn't. I want to make teachers better. All the teachers, good teachers, medium teachers, poor teachers. Everybody starts on their job. Sometimes you have difficulty. There are things you don't understand, things that you need to learn. And some of that can be learned by experience, but it really helps when you have a mentor and a trainer who can firsthand come in, understand your individual problems, coach you and mentor you into becoming better. That's what I try to do with other debaters here on QallOut. And that's what I think people should do with teachers as well in order to make the profession overall better. And that means not hanging a sort of Damocles over somebody's head because the students don't like them. Yes, it's important to get these student evaluations. I agree, they're fine. They're good to have. But almost every one of your citations say things like factoring in, part of the evaluation. And that is not what the resolution calls for. It calls for a hard, fixed line based on statistics. It needs to be an evaluated line based on information that education professionals need to judge. That's a lot better, not something that's been addressed in this debate on the pro side. And again, teacher shortage is going to make their plan pretty much impossible because they're going to exacerbate the existing teacher shortage. I demonstrated the shortage. I read the statistics from the Department of Education showing that there are widespread acute shortages more than ever before. It's getting a worse and worse problem. And part of the reason is plans like this that create a harsh, arbitrary judgment on teachers and scare them away from the profession. However, if we offer mentoring and we offer training and resource and support for teachers, my other piece of evidence shows very clearly that study that will increase teacher retention, reduce problems with teacher shortages, and that in turn will actually allow schools and administrators to be a little bit more choosy. However, on that plan, as we exacerbate the teacher shortages, end up without any teachers, you can't fire those people at the bottom because you can have nobody to teach the kids. The article that I read, I don't quote these parts, but it went on to say, well, they started recruiting, they lowered their standards so you don't have to have any educational skill in order to be a teacher. They started recruiting parents to be teachers in schools without any credentials in Arizona. All over the map, they're getting desperate out there because there are not enough trained professionals in order to do this because we treat teachers terribly. We put them through a meat grinder and it's always like, we got to be tough. We'll fire these teachers. We'll be harsh to them. You grind them up into the system and spit them out the other end. They're not paid all that well to begin with. And they hate it and they're running away from the profession. In the end, we don't have people that can inspire kids because the teachers themselves are not inspired. We need a better plan. We don't need arbitrary standards. Student ratings are great, but what we need is a systematic, thoughtful method that will help evaluate and improve the quality of all the teachers in our system, attract more people to the profession, and make better education for kids, because that is the bottom line. So our pros plan is stuck in a catch-22. If it doesn't do any good, of course, we haven't shown that firing people actually helps. And B, if they can't fire people, then they get stuck and they can't do anything with their plans. So, I guess I've got 30 seconds for final rebuttal. I'm done for now.
I just wanted to deliver my final case. We have seen a myriad of evidence that really wasn't contested by the other side that these surveys do show what classes are succeeding, what classes are not succeeding, whether or not teachers are doing a good job. It is really uncontested by the many sources I provided. My contention then, what I value is what's best for the child. So I think we should absolutely fire teachers who consistently and significantly fall below their peers, other teachers, which was only 2% when the Atlantic looked at a school in Memphis that did this. Only 2% of teachers had to be fired because of this. We should get rid of those 2% of teachers because, as the other source I provided said, it equals 6 months extra learning, more than 6 times what a master's degree would do for that teacher. And we absolutely should not leave our children with bad teachers, but we should reward the good teachers. And new teachers are excited about this, according to the New Teacher Project, the other source I read.
Hiring a tiny percentage of teachers is not going to have a significant effect on the education system. The 2% statistic was saying that really great teachers deliver great education. Well, that's absolutely true. I want to make more teachers great teachers. We do that by training and mentoring, and we do that by encouraging more people into the profession, by having fair, reasonable judging standards of teacher quality. I didn't ignore any evidence. Student evaluations are perfectly wonderful to use in conjunction with other methods. Thank you.